Good morning. Okay, so we're going to start learning how to actually put our research into an essay. Okay, so if you remember, we started off the other day with these. Okay, so you wrote down all of these should be filled in, and then this part is the most important part. This part is what should be filled in. So you already saw a video about how to put all of your folders and your pockets inside. So let's go ahead and make this whatever color it's supposed to be, which I think is green. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and make this whatever the other color was that I'm using, which is blue. And then the last one I'm doing is, I believe, purple. So, yeah. So I'm going to color those purple. Okay. So I already divided it up, so I know what it's going to look like. So I'm going to focus on my green bucket today. So yesterday, you guys looked at your folders. And then we just made our envelopes, our A and our B, that go underneath our Roman numeral 1. So we've got the first part of our outline. So what an outline will look like is it'll look like this. A Roman numeral 1, a letter A, a 1, and a 2. The 1 and the 2 are the evidence that we have. Okay, and then we have to write out a test for every single piece of evidence. And we'll get to that in a minute, okay? So you've already sorted out your buckets. We've done that where you put your cards into each color. So now we're going to get to the writing portion. So we want to write a sentence for this folder. So the folder is behaviors and stressors. So we want to come up with a sentence that basically has that same idea. So what we want to do is write a sentence for that, and we're going to put it right here in this box. Okay, so the sentence stem is the first major contributing factor to why school shootings keep happening is because, okay, so the first major contributing factor is this behaviors or stressors or whatever you're going to call it. So what I wrote on mine is one major contributing factor to why school shootings keep happening is because behaviors go unrecognized or ignored and stressors from students' pasts aren't generally known by staff. Okay, so that's what I wrote down for this. So that's going to be my first sentence of my first paragraph. After that, we've got our pockets that we have. So you've already written down these I call them the Fruit Loops, but you've already written this down, right? Mine's empty, but yours should be full. And like I said in the other video, if you aren't done, you need to be working on that now, because otherwise this next part is going to be impossible to do. Okay? So you're going to want to go back to this so that you can reference it. So you go back to it, and you're going to go to your A, which is your first envelope. Okay? So when you go back and you look at your information, you look at this, and these are the Fruit Loops, right? Like I said, okay, this is in blue. This is a blue ring. Just copy and paste that to where this blue is. And where this pink Fruit Loop is, you're going to put where this pink is. So you don't have to rewrite it. So what you can essentially do is just copy and paste all of that right into one way blank is a concern. And remember, I talked about whatever my first A was. I said one specific key element is knowing the history of the shooter's backgrounds. And then I went ahead and I put all of my Fruit Loops in there. Okay, so what I did after I did that is I did find a piece of research I wanted to insert there. So I inserted the research, but I'm not going to show you that right now. Okay, so now I've got my first sentence, which is up here, my Roman numeral 1. And I've got my second couple of sentences based on what I filled out right here, and that is my pocket A. The next part is the note card. So whatever note card I use next, I am going to use one of these note cards that I have. So where is the one I use? Okay, so it's this note card. Okay, so I'm going to talk about that one first. But remember, I have to have a sentence for each one of these. So my number one, I'm going to come up with a sentence, okay? And that number one sentence I have to write as a topic of some sort. So what I have written is students' backgrounds are important to know what makes them behave the way they do, but this is especially important when it comes to school shooters. So that's my number one sentence, okay? Then I have what's called the test. So everywhere where there's this yellow box, that's going to be my evidence that I need. So I'm going to put this in there. But what we need to do is we have to have what the test is called a test because it has a topic, sentence, evidence, support, and tie back. So if I look inside my folder, I've got my test written, right? So what that means is that we need to include all the information. So to begin with, that's topic, sentence, to introduce my evidence, okay? So what I have written there is that sentence that I just wrote. So my number one and my topic sentence are the same. Does that make sense? My E is my evidence. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that I let people know that I'm going into evidence. So I use what's called a lead-in. So I can say according to, if it's an author, I can say Kaplan states, or whatever I want. But that's the tie-in, or not the tie-in, but the lead-in. Okay, so I put in according to, as stated by the USS article, one thing many of the shooters have in common is, and then I have my quote, which is the majority of plotters, 91%, experienced life stressors, in the 5 years prior to their attack. For most, 81%, the stressors happened in the year leading up to the discovery. Okay, and then I have my author, which is the United Secret States Service, and then the page number, which I looked up. I have the full packet, and I looked in that, and it's actually page 39, paragraph 2. So I put that in parentheses, period on the outside, okay? So after I do that, this is the most important part, and that's the S part, okay? So don't allow me to say, so what? So what? Every time you give me new information, I need you to answer the question, so what? Okay, so I mean, it seems obvious to you, right? You're like, well, obviously that means me. If it then say, obviously this means, and then write it in there. Okay, so when I just wrote that quote down, I said 91% experienced life stressors, and 81% was within 1 year. Okay, so it seems obvious to you or me or somebody who's researched this that those life stressors do play a huge part in what makes this happen because it's such a large percentage. So I have to explain that to my reader because they haven't read the same research I have. So what I put down is my support, and you can have as many sentences there as you want, is this clearly indicates a large majority of shooters had no way of coping with their emotions. This can contribute by influencing a shooter's mental stability. This instability can often cause difficulty in knowing how to cope with stressors and traumas, which can lead to confusion, irrational thinking, or even acting out against others. Then I said, offering all students different coping mechanisms while creating a safe environment for students might help reduce some stressors. To begin with, when noticing behaviors that seem out of the norm for students, important to review, there are history, criminal records, emotional state, family traumas, or other recent events that may have occurred, the unusual behaviors. Okay, so that's what I wrote down for my support. And actually the last sentence that I wrote goes with my tie back. And the tie back is when we take the information that we use to support, we want to go, this is how it applies back to my Roman numeral 1. So the last sentence that I wrote, which was to begin with, when noticing behavior that seems out of the norm for students, important to review, blah, 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 all of that, that's my tie back. So you need to have at least one sentence for your topic sentence. You have to have your evidence, and you have to cite it correctly, and then you've got to have your support. And that's the majority of the paper, the part that I'm really looking for, is the support. How do you explain this particular evidence, and why is it relevant to your Roman numeral 1 or Roman numeral 2 or whatever it is, and your overall claim? Then the tieback, which is this is important and relates to the paper because, and then it goes back to that. Okay? So after you do that, you've got our graphic organizer. We have a 1 filled in, we have an A filled in, we have a 1 in our test. But if we have a 1 in an outline, you have to have a 2. You can't break something in half and only have one piece. So we need a second piece of evidence there. And if you remember from back over here, you guys had 2 note cards, or you're supposed to have 2 note cards underneath each one. So that's what we're going to do. So now we're going to do our second piece of evidence. Okay. So when I do my second piece of evidence, I've given you these writing stems just so that you can get something down on paper. But you can totally change it in any part of the draft you want on this or anywhere else. Okay. So what I have is, in my next one, is to begin with, let me find it. To begin with, many students face things like bullying as well as adverse childhood experiences, referred to as ACEs. Okay, that's my number 2, which is, I'm sorry, not my number 2, my, yes, my number 2. My number 2, which is my second note card underneath my envelope. Okay, so I have what I just said, and then that's my topic sentence. So my 2 and my topic sentence are the same thing. Then my evidence is, for an instance, in an article by the United States Service, that's my lead-in, and then I have my evidence. It states that 22% of the school shooters felt bullied, while 52% of school shooters felt depressed or suicidal, and 30% had ACE, which is adverse child experiences. And then I have my end quote, my parenthesis, my author, my page number, end parenthesis, period. Okay, so that's my evidence. And then remember, this is the heart of the paper. I have to explain what that means and the relationship to my essay. So what I have is, what this means is that on the low end, a quarter of students and up to half of high school students have stressors that they may not be able to deal with on their own. Not knowing how to deal with it leaves them with only a handful of options, and sometimes those options are scary. Knowing that almost half of high school students are feeling stressed out from a major trauma should make the education system more aware of the environment the students are in and create a safe place. Okay, so that's explaining my support. Now to tie it back, I have another specific key element of knowing another person's background or history would also include, and then it's also tying it back, but it's also transitioning me into my next idea, which is commonalities. Okay, so another specific key element in knowing the history of the shooter's background is to look out for ideas or things that we see that a lot of school shooters have in common. I'll probably want to put something in there about how it's nearly impossible to profile, but I can talk about some of those commonalities so that when we see something, we can go, these are things that people have in common. So I haven't written that part of the bucket out yet, but when I'm done, what I'll have is, I will have, remember up here, I have my envelope for letter A, then I had my note card, which was evidence 1, my test 2, which was my evidence 2, my note card 2, and then I've got my envelope, not my envelope B, but then I go into my next part, which is, like I said, envelope B. Okay, and that's going to start all over again. So you can look at the bottom of this, and it has my bucket 1 written out, which is what I was reading off over this screen. Okay, so it has all of that written out. I don't have my B written on here, but it also shows you here kind of how it should look, how you should lay it out. So you've got your folder sentence, you've got your envelope sentence, then you've got your two your 2 note cards, sentence, sentence, but actually each one of these sentences is actually a paragraph, because this is the T part of the test, and then you need to come up, or you need to come up with the E, the S, and the T. Okay, so you do that for each. You've got one sentence, 2, 3, 4, right? Then you've got your number 2, which is your next note card, and another test. And then you have your transition back to your Roman numeral 1. And then we go into B, card with a test, and card with a test. Okay, and that's just one bucket. So you can see this kind of in one handout. I created this for you, which is bucket 1. So you write all of your sentences right in there, and you know that your bucket 1 is done. Then you can do bucket 2, and then you can do bucket 3. So it's totally up to you what you want to do. If you want to do this graphic organizer, if you just want to write it out on the other graphic organizer that I have, which is this one, you can do that. You can erase the stuff that I have and just put it in. I put this here because I wanted you guys to have those sentence stems, but you don't have to use those. Okay? So when you are finished, what you will have, a very rough draft that looks something like this, which is your first bucket. Okay, this I have not gone through and spell checked this. I haven't gone through and checked my citations. I haven't checked anything. The only thing I've done is highlighted my resources, my evidence, so that I know when I go back and I look at it, I can find it. This is what is due. When is that due? You're supposed to have just the outline done. So you will need just the outline part, just this portion, like down here, this portion or this, done for tomorrow, but that would be for group B today, and then it would be Sunday night for group A. So everybody's is due on Sunday night. You have to have at least one bucket done. Okay, so that includes evidence, the test, all of that stuff. So that should help you with the organization of each individual bucket. When you're done, you're going to have these 3 long pieces, and then we're going to end up with an intro and a conclusion, and we're going to be done with our paper. Okay, but we do have to go back and we have to fix some stuff and proofread, revise, edit, that kind of thing. Okay, so if you have questions, please ask, and we're going to work on that today in class. All right, great. Talk to you guys later, and I hope that helps.